Pagoda, Sampa.
I can't hear you.
Thank you. I put myself on mute. I was just saying, hello, welcome everyone. This is Jahan, and the founding steward of the Rootwater Project, and I'm very excited to have Patricia Powell in conversation with us today, talking story medicine in Afro-Caribbean culture and literature. And before we get started, I want to just take a moment to share again, if you don't know, that the Rootwater Project supports descendants of enslaved Africans in alchemizing intergenerational grief into healing through storytelling, education, and ritual. So these community conversations are one part the storytelling, one part the education, and also a bit of ritual. I really have been inspired by some of the wisdom from the Pagoda people that Malidoma Somé has shared, which is that when two or more are gathered with intention, then the conditions for ritual are set. And that just really speaks to me of the power of doing the things that we do mindfully and doing them on purpose. And that, you know, in this culture and in this time, everything is like bigger is better and faster and all of that. And that, like, everything doesn't need that to be powerful. It's okay for it to just be a small community of people doing the work. And that matters just as much. So with that in mind, also, I like to start off with libations practice. Invite us all. My plant off screen, I'm twisted so you can kind of see the leaves of it there. And then begin just by calling in all of our particular cultural ancestors and those who survived and those who did not survive the Ma'afa to make it into the Americas. And in their honor, we pour a bit of water and say Ashe, letting them know that they are welcome in this space with us as collaborators and contributors to the conversation. And as our invited speaker, I would love for you to share the name of one ancestor and a little bit of story about why this ancestor is important to you as a part of the work that you do.
Yeah, so I'll share the name of my ancestor, Nora Baker. And she's been gone for a while now, but she raised me from the time I was 3 months old, and she died when I was 16. And I didn't really have an understanding of ancestor for the longest. I mean, I knew we had ancestors, but I didn't understand actually the role they played in our lives until I encountered Malidoma's work and his lectures. Actually, I met him, and we worked together a little bit. But this particular ancestor, when she died at 16 was when I moved to the U.S. to live with my mother, my birth mother. But my great aunt had raised me from 3 months, and I was brokenhearted when she died because she was my mother. And the minute I got here, I gave her no peace. I called her every minute of every day because I needed to understand my life in this new country and understand my relationship with my mother, and I needed ease for my broken heart. And I called her. I mean, I didn't even know that she would come, but I didn't know what else to do. And I remember I was in high school and I went to see a psychic, and I don't even know how I found this woman and how many buses I took to get to her house. And I, because I wanted contact with my great aunt. And she was the one who said to me, you don't have to take 10 buses to get out here. You can just call her from anywhere, call her and she'll come. And so that was my relationship, the beginning of my relationship with her in a whole different way. And I truly believe that everything that has happened in my life, she has orchestrated. And I have always felt like she was more powerful dead than alive. I felt like she helped me with all of my books. I felt like she led me to all the people that I needed to meet. She helped me through school. She helped me navigate when I left home. Finally, she helped me to navigate a life. So she was very alive to me. I'm sure she was very tired, and she's like, oh God, when am I going to be able to rest? And this child will leave me alone. But it went on for some time. I've only just recently, actually, I think I've given her a break. But yeah.
That's what they signed up for. That's beautiful. I appreciate that. And I feel like it also it speaks to something that I know I've heard, particularly coming from like and I feel like I often pause, especially when I'm in really intentional conversation and trying to find the right words, because so many of the words that we've been given to use are actually misleading and inaccurate. So just recognizing that, like, before I say this, but so this comes to me, I'll say, from like traditions and cultures that practice Dia de los Muertos and that tradition of ancestor connection. Mm-hmm. But it's the idea that it's like part of the work of that conversation is like we stay alive in memory. Like mm-hmm. that is the only way that we achieve anything like immortality, is the fact that people continue to tell our stories after us. Mm-hmm. And so I just really can connect to that from some of my own experiences of people who have passed. And then I've been like, but wait, there's so much more I still need you to do for me. But also in the way that when I think about that from my perspective, I feel like they actually celebrated one as a hyper independent person. So when they were here, I wasn't asking them for a whole lot. Finally, they want to listen. But also that it keeps their memory alive, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
They stay with me, and that is a part of the way that they continue to be present in this particular aspect.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for that. I will share that what was with me today is I'm really thinking of my mother, Rita Elise Ford, and thinking of particularly her work as a librarian and an archivist, and the way that shaped her perception on what you do while you're alive to preserve your own story, and the importance of having a record of your own story and recognizing that that is a part of the historical record, that like there's no story that is too small. Mm-hmm. And that is a perspective that I have walked with myself. And that has just helped me feel very connected and essentially very present to the time of me being alive. Mm-hmm. It's like right now, not any other time in history. And there's a reason I'm in this place, in this time, in this body, with these experiences, because it's a part of a story that's so much bigger than me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, yeah.
The honor, I read it at least for, say Ashe. Oh, my cat. To just close it out, to also name that there are so many names that we do not know, but whose stories absolutely feed into ours, and that we also honor them and invite those who are healthy and well with intentions to support our cause and purpose to be present with us. And say Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. So with that, we kind of like jumped in a little bit in a horseshoe, and we like heard about your people. And so now let's just hear a little bit more about who are you? Who is
yeah, so I'm a writer and teacher and healer and facilitator. I'm a novelist. I've published 4 novels, and I have a 5th, The Bomb Yard, that's on the way. I'm a literature and creative writing professor at Mills College at Northeastern University. I also I'm a healer, and I teach at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. And I also do facilitation work there and in other venues. What else can I tell you? I'm from Jamaica. I moved here when I was 16, and my family moved to Boston, and I moved to California 20 years ago, I think. And I moved out here. I actually had come on a trip when I was in graduate school. I had come out here one summer. Or I don't know, maybe it was fall. And what I loved about being out here was that you could have roses growing all year. And I wanted to be in a place like that because it reminded me of the Caribbean. So I kept trying to find ways to make it back here, and I eventually did. So I'm happy to be here.
Love that. I think where I'll start is actually a question that we started talking about before the call, just dropping in together. And I just so appreciated the answer that you shared with me about your process and your journey of both writing and healing. And so since the title of this conversation is story medicine, like we're beginning there, of like, what does that mean to you? What does the idea of story medicine bring up for you?
Yeah, I think, I've always been writing stories, but I think it took on more meaning when my second novel came out. It's called A Small Gathering of Bones, and it's a novel about a group of gay men in Jamaica dealing with AIDS. Most of my novels are set in Jamaica, and so after the novel was published, I was invited to give a reading in London at an AIDS center. And there were lots of Caribbean people at this center, and I gave my reading there. And at the end of the reading, a man came up to me and he was crying, and he said, it's the first time he's ever seen himself in literature not portrayed as a pariah, basically, but portrayed as a regular person going through some big challenges in his life, making mistakes, having joy, figuring out life, and what a gift that was to him. And I was in my early 20s at the time, or mid 20s at the time, and I think it was the first time I understood what I was doing. I understood that that this writing had really big implications. Like, I wasn't just telling a story. I was actually touching people's lives, that there were real people reading this. I mean, I knew that, but this was different to have met someone who said, I'd never seen myself like this before. Suddenly, I feel like my experiences are valued. I am valued and validated, and that was really important to me. And so I began to think about writing very differently. And then when The Pagoda came out, which is a book set during the 19th century about Chinese immigration to Jamaica. And it's a book about a cross-dresser, which is what, that was a term we used back in the 80s and 90s when I was preparing that book. And so the book is about a lot of things, but at the end of the novel, my character, whose name is Lo, Mr. Lo, the woman passing as a male shopkeeper, Mr. Lo, decides to build a center where all the immigrant Chinese who are in Jamaica and in the Caribbean can come once a year and have celebrations. And the Chinese who went to Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean are called Hakka. They're from an ethnic group called the Hakkas. And after the novel came out, I got a letter from a man named Mr. Lo. And he said, "Hi, I am Mr. Lo, like your character." And and in my novel, Lo did not finish his center. The novel ended before he could complete the center, but in the last few chapters, he's found a location, and he started to bring the materials to build the center. So I get this letter from this man named Mr. Lo, and he said, "Your Mr. Lo did not finish his center, but I have finished mine, and I'd love to invite you to the inaugural ceremony." And you can just imagine, I got this letter and I'm thinking, what the hell is happening? And my head is like vibrating in strange ways. Anyway, I go to this event, and it's and everyone is wearing Hakka dress, and they're eating Hakka dishes, and they're playing Hakka music. And I meet this Mr. Lo, who looks a lot like my character, and he said, this is, and it was an inaugural gathering of Hakkas in Toronto.
Wow.
And he wanted to invite me. And it was very moving, as you can imagine, because I was thinking, wow, this is like the next page of my novel. It's like, like, what is happening here?
Like literally where art becomes life. Like
absolutely,
that intersection.
absolutely. And I was in the middle of it. And so I think it was after that I really came to the understanding that the work, like the stories come to us, they're an invitation for us to write them, to give life to them, to deliver them to the world, and that is my role as a writer, is to listen and to be open to this communication and to do the work that I need to do. So, and I did need to do a lot of work to create that book, so that it would not, I was writing from the point of view of a Chinese character, a Chinese woman who had come to Jamaica in the 19th century. And so whatever it took to be able to write that character with as much authenticity and kindness, and so that all of my Chinese readers would not shut the book at once, but could find a place in there for themselves. And so, yes, and there was an incredible amount of research that was necessary to create that book, and I was willing to do the work. Oh, so now I have lost track of my point, but you get the drift.
Well, I can share some of what I was just pulling from listening to it, which is one, that there's magic in the practice. And that's a word that gets used a lot of different ways. And, for some people, as soon as you say that, it's just like, whoop, they're not listening anymore. You've gone too low, it's out the door. And other people are just like, yes, I immediately understand that. I fall into the category of people who is just like, well, all of everything is magic, because I know I can't explain my own isness, right? Like, I can't. I can talk to you about physical properties of it. I can talk to you about my reflections of my own experience of it. But I can give absolutely no concrete empirical evidence as to why I exist, or why anybody or anything does. And yet it does. And
Yeah.
we all have something that we've experienced that, you know, in English we call synchronicity, which is like where things line up and there's just these connections that are made that, again, is like you could not rationally, like the plot line that you just shared is the kind of stuff that like writers agonize about. Like, I'm also a writer, so I won't maybe project out to everybody. I can say like I would agonize over like generating a plot line like that that happens in reality all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, to me, there's medicine in that surrender
Mm-hmm.
to that.
Mm-hmm.
Of,
Mm-hmm.
and like I've heard that in conversation and in process with writers and just humans as well, working in all kinds of different creative forms. But that there is a point at which your ego self stops operating,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you allow yourself to be a part of something bigger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also think that we're not alone. Like, I mean, we know this, right? But we're walking amongst all the people who were here before us, and their stories are still alive. And that's what we are recording.
And I have a question kind of based on that, which is from another conversation that I was in with a friend and collaborator, co-conspirator, Dr. Ramalika Imhotep, who is currently teaching at Spelman, my alma mater. And we were just talking, as we kind of do, like, you know, we drop, part of why we work as friends is that we drop easily into the big existential conversations. And I was reflecting on having gone to see this performance. It was Martha Graham's the 100-year anniversary of the Martha Graham Company. And I was reflecting on something about like why that particular lane of storytelling through like modern dance, as opposed to like some other dance forms, has often not quite clicked with me. And it's something that I've felt as a cultural tension, as somebody who was very much raised in an intentionally Black and Pan-African space, and with that consciousness and lots of experiences to support that. So not just theory, but lots of lived practice of that. But also developing in a predominantly white environment with those cultural norms also very present. And that one of the things that I had noticed is like, for me, in Pan-African storytelling, period, there's always a lesson. It's never there just for the sake of beauty or aesthetics. So like there's always something very intentionally intending to be transmitted. And I wonder about that in your relationship with, as being a storyteller from a particular cultural tradition that's like, you know, part of the African diaspora, if any of that resonates to you about like the place of really education in story and the messaging and like the transmission property of storytelling.
Well, yes, but I didn't know that when I first started to write. Like, I only became very aware of it after. Like, I never understood what I was writing in the moment. Like, I knew the general plot, and I knew that, okay, I want to give voice to these lives that are often not validated or seen. So I wanted to do that. So I knew that on a conscious level. But how that book would impact someone else, I had no idea. Or what they heard or how it touched them, I had no idea. I also didn't know that about the Pagoda, or the book I wrote after that, which is about child sexual abuse. Like I didn't know, like I knew what my objectives were, but the underlying messages, I did not know those. And in this book that I just completed, that's not out yet, there's a scene where her father was hanged for, which was a very common thing in the Caribbean. The colonists would hang anybody that they thought was practicing obia or any kind of spiritual technology. And so I wrote that scene because she has to go and find him, and he's been long dead, but to free herself, she has to go and find him, and she goes and she finds him, and I wanted to, and it's kind of traumatic, for her to cut him down and to find him and to confront this image, and I decided to create a ritual for him and for her and for all of us who have experienced this now and in other lifetimes. And so that was a very different thing that I was doing. But I could only do that now because I am a little older. I have more healing experience. I understand the significance of a ritual. I know that her healing this, her father, would also reverberate into the world of everybody who comes into contact with this material. That was the intention I was setting as I was writing this, that everybody who encounters this receives a healing, and the healing moves through the generations. And it's a healing for both the people who put him up there and the people who were up there. And yeah, I've forgotten your question, so I can't bring it around to a nice conclusion, but that's what I wanted to say.
Well, the question was really about kind of your own experience of like Afro-Caribbean literature and its what I would call like its current of messaging or meaning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I feel like I heard it in what you said of when I think of the things that I read and the things that were given to me to read. And again, I was very spoiled to have a mother who was a librarian. So I had a highly curated
right.
stack of books.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that also influences like my, storytelling of this, but I always felt the presence of a type of care that like whoever is telling this story wrote it so that some little Black child would pick it up one day and have a particular experience of themselves, whether it be an experience of connection, an experience of pride, an experience of understanding, but that was part of the intention. And so so to me, there's cultural specificity in that, because one of the things that I hear often come out of like white cultural discussions of art is like, it's enough for it to just be pretty. It's enough for it to exist for its aesthetic whatever's alone. And I don't totally disagree with that. Like there's meaning to beauty. But it also, there's a cultural tension for me there.
Mhm, mhm,
When in my own gaze of how I
mhm,
look at things, I'm always looking for meaning.
mhm,
Like that is a part of the way that I was culturally taught to look at the world, is that
mhm.
the thing is not meaningless. It's not some mechanical, inanimate thing if we are animate inside of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that I do think that I do think that everything we create comes from a consciousness, and even if we think that there isn't a message in there, there is one. Like I don't think we are entirely. I know that we're not free of the imaginary or the creative imaginary. It's tethered to all of what we are. So it's almost impossible for something not to have a message. The message might not be as resonant to us as we would like it to be, but there is something there, I think.
And then I had, what's Lord, lost track
Because
of my
there's always intention that's going into the creation of something.
Mhm. Maybe the difference is like an expectation of the articulation of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I also think about, because an idea that I have that I kind of work with just in my life is like I think about story as a unit of measurement of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like a viable story. We have some stories that have been with humans for as long as we've been humans. And that means something, that those stories are that pervasive, or that they keep reappearing over time, and that happens often independently of cultural contact, or like any, again, of like the rational roads that you might think of as to like, oh well, this person traveled here and they brought the story back, and it's like, well, we don't have any evidence that happened. It just seems like these people just arrived at story, or a story arrived in them, um, in these ways that are connecting in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when I say that, I think about fairy tales, and how fairy tales, if you go back to the original fairy tales, they're pretty awful. Like, it's like a lot of child abuse, sometimes some cannibalism, like very violent, very yeah, not Disney.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
um but I bring that around because, like, as you were talking about this scene with a woman finding her father who has been lynched, and like, what was it like to write about something that is like so painful, but to also hold the potential for healing, as telling, like, as part of the intention of telling that story.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about, I didn't want to re-traumatize my audience. I didn't want to re-traumatize myself, but it was the reality of what we had lived. And so, and I was thinking, how can I write this in a way that that takes the horror away from it? Now we don't have to go through that again. And so that, yeah, that was the intention, to write this scene where she gets to care for him, and to invite nature, the trees, the cotton tree, which is really big in rituals in the Caribbean, to participate in the healing and in the clearing, um, and yeah, to invite all of nature to be a part, the whole natural world to be a part of that healing. the stars, the butterflies, the trees, the land, the water. So yeah, I have to hear from more people I want to hear from more people to see if it's effective, but that was the intention.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of that, you also referenced the cotton tree. And can you share a little bit about like what that means symbolically in the culture?
Yeah, there are these ginormous, amazing, beautiful trees. They just spread out forever. And I think that a lot of people were lynched there. And I think that under those, on the limbs of those trees. And I think that we have reclaimed those trees as part of our ancestors, as part of our healing. And they are, a lot of rituals are performed there. I think we have just reclaimed them. And the trees too, in their wild intelligence, have assisted us in clearing the land, in clearing our bodies, in clearing our psyches, in helping us through our grief. Yeah.
While you were sharing that, what I just kind of got a sense of was the, and like particularly thinking about ancestors and life moving in cycles, that it's a little macabre, but is also very real. That death feeds life.
Yeah.
And like in very literal ways, those trees actually are embodying a lot of our ancestors, because of the fact that they did die on those trees.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it really makes me, because I haven't like talked about this so much publicly yet as part of what the project is doing, but part of our work is site-specific ritual work on former plantation sites. And so that's really just making me in this moment think even more deeply about like how do we invite in the trees specifically into it. And whenever I've done grief ritual work, it's not always been possible because of context, but I do always prioritize us being like within a natural ecosystem where people can have those sorts of like conversations, just like be in relationship with the non-human world. Because I feel like that's a part of like, as the legacy of chattel enslavement, that's so much of what was harmed and damaged in us was our relationship to the non-human world, which is such a big part of why we were stolen in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were so skillful with plants and non-human animals and ecosystems, and they're like, oh, we need that.
Mm-hmm.
When it took our knowledge and our skills in that. Yeah, there's so many places I could go, but
I definitely feel that that relationship with the natural world was very much a part of who we were before we came to the New World, and right, was so much a part of who we were before we were brought here, and that we tried as much as we could to continue to harbor that relationship, and yeah, it was a big threat. It's a big threat, and I like that in in the healings that we do, in the rituals that we're doing, we do return ourselves to the natural world, or we do invite the natural world to be a huge part of what we're doing, so that they can bring balance and just a higher knowledge to what we're doing.
Or think about that with the libations practice. It's very simple, but it's also really effective at like, that's right, everything needs water. We both, require this thing, and that alone builds relationship and connection and empathy.
Yeah.
Like, what it really takes to live.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this one ritual. I don't remember all the details of it that Malidoma told us about, but it was, we would pour milk in the sea, and as a way of feeding all those spirits that were in the water.
Yeah. Before I go to the next question, one of the most profound experiences I've been able to have was to travel to the Cape Coast of Ghana and release some of my mother's ashes there. And to be like just down the coast, like a visible site of some of the dungeons where they kept us before they would put us on ships. And just this kind of full circle moment that felt so strange, of like, traveling back to the site of the pain to like infuse beauty into that.
Right.
And like this, again, these contradictions and these tensions between like captivity and freedom, and like the witness, the feeling like the land sees me return with her. And like, it's just, that whole swirl of all the things.
Yeah. I like that image very much, of bringing a kind of beauty to this place that has such a terrible history. And that feels really important. Like, that feels like a part of the healing too. When I think about you wanting to do the grief work on plantations, I feel like we are not only healing the participants, but also the land, and inviting the nature to be a part of that healing.
In some ways that, and I don't think I had thought about it quite this clearly until this moment, but as I mentioned before, I went to Spelman, which is a historically Black all-female college in Atlanta. And for me, that was my first time living outside of California. So going to a different ecosystem, experiencing real winter, like off the California coast. But the thing that really struck me about the nature there was the kudzu. And it is this creeping, invasive vine that is just everywhere, just huge stands of trees. And those trees are all blanketed by this thing. And how I used to drive, because my brother lived a little bit, well, Metro Atlanta is huge. Anyways, all of those are side details. But I used to be driving around, and I would get so creeped out by the kudzu, because my imagination, as soon as it like encountered that forest, was like, what stories are in there that we will never be able to untangle from those vines? This kind of feeling of almost being haunted. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that. And particularly Black folks who have like returned in some way. So my father is from Alabama, grew up in Jim Crow, came out to California, and then both me and my brother at different times returned to the South for particular things. And again, that cycle of like leaving, returning, the back and forth of that, just feeling really potent in like my own curiosity, but also my own aversion. of like, I want to know, but do I really want to know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Could I actually walk with the heaviness of that if I really did know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but so that is part of it. And there's like a larger through thread I want to wrap there, which really has to do with that storytelling piece. Because it was like the stories that I knew were entangled in there that I would never hear, but I could imagine to a degree because of the stories that I did know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so with that, I wonder about just in your own family, were these kinds of histories talked about? Or, did people share like, well, this is what happened to your great aunt so and so, or this is what happened when your uncle whomever got into an argument with a white man about a horse, like, or was that kind of like, well, we don't talk about that, like you say
Yeah,
that name
I,
and everybody else forget.
I did not hear those stories growing up. I knew that we had been enslaved, but that's the extent of it. Like I didn't learn about the details of those things until I went to college and started reading and taking classes, But I didn't even understand what it meant to have an ancestor as opposed to just a dead relative, but what ancestry means, the significance of that. No, I do know that my grandmother's mother, her mother was a little girl when slavery ended. Like I had heard that story, and the rejoicing on the compound when they found out that it was over. Like I remember hearing that story, but that's the extent of it. No, nobody talked about that because I think the impulse, the emphasis was on surviving now, like making it now, going to school so that we could prosper, and all the ways to get us to go to school and learn this new way of being in the world. And so that was a big emphasis.
How did it feel to learn about that sort of outside of relationship? Like, how did it feel to learn about something that's so personal in a way, but in that context was academic?
I'm just thinking that in schools, when I was growing up in Jamaica, they did talk about Nanny, who was a warrior, and she was famed for being able to, she was able to practice some amazing kind of alchemy where when they would try to shoot her, she could turn those bullets around and send them back to the shooters and kill them. And yeah, and there's some other parts to that too, which involved her vagina. But she was incredible, and we heard those stories in school, but we didn't really know what they meant. We didn't really understand them. As a kid growing up, there were medicine people in my village, but I didn't really understand what that meant. I knew that they healed the sick, but that they had special powers. But, that was just Mr. Marcus that lived up the road, or Mr. Malcolm. This was just what they did. Or there were these women who wore these white head ties and would dance this particular kind of dance. And they would say that they were spiritualists, they were like, they practiced these kind of spiritual technologies. But there was like no one, you knew these things and you didn't know what they meant. so and so did this thing and so did that thing, and you accepted it, and you sort of knew what it meant, but you didn't, and you also didn't ask, because those were big people's things. And I was always a child, like listening and and trying to be quiet so nobody would realize I was there, hearing all these big people, listening to all these conversations. So I knew and I didn't know. And it was only when I went to school, went to college, and my own research, as I became more interested in this stuff, that I found out more. What did that mean? Yeah, I wish I knew back then to be able to ask all the questions, because I know they had the stories. My grandparents, my great aunt who raised me, I knew they had the stories, but I think they also carried the fear. A lot of us carry that fear of we didn't want to be hanged,
Right.
and that fear still lives in us. In fact, it's still on the books. That if you're caught practicing, you can be imprisoned, and I think it's still in the psyche, and we know and we don't want to know.
Yeah. I really regretting that I only made this an hour. So I feel like, as always, as happens when you get into the big real conversations,
Yeah,
we could talk about this all week.
I know.
And still probably be like, we just scratched the surface. But to kind of start to close us out, my closing question for you is, if there is one healing practice that people in the diaspora that you feel like they should be practicing, what would that be?
I was thinking about that question. I said, I bet you she's going to ask that one. So
Pronouns.
I'm sorry. I'm certain they're going to ask that question. I think that we have forgotten that we're divine, that we are of the divine. Because I think if we realize that we were of God, and truly believe that perhaps we would treat ourselves a little differently, and treat each other a little differently, and love ourselves a little differently, and care for ourselves a little differently. If we truly believe that this being that we are was kind of sacred, was special. I think we've forgotten that, and we've been taught that we're nothing and we deserve the worst, and we've just heard all these things, and I wonder, how would it be if we were to begin to remember, or just to treat ourselves like the special persons that we are, the lovable, caring, kind, generous people that we are.
That's a beautiful answer. Partially because, it's always easier said than done. But part of why I really appreciate that is it's not like you need to go to Kilimanjaro and eat this herb and then do this for 7 days. It's something that's so accessible in a way, and really does start within. And I'll sort of just close it by referencing a quote that I feel like I've only just recently really been able to actually understand, but I've heard it my whole life as a Pan-African saying, which is that if there is no enemy within, the enemy without can do you no harm. And it's like it used to just be words, but something happened in like my mid-30s where it just clicked and started to make sense, of like, oh, if there's no funky inner dialogue that I'm walking around with, whatever somebody says from the outside, it doesn't stick.
No.
So that like self-excavation process of just like, oh.
That's a beautiful quote.
Yeah. And I've never heard a particular source from it. It just comes as Pan-African saying. But
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for dropping in with us, sharing your journey. And I hope to have you back so we can continue.
Jihan, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me. And you are such a wonderful, you have such wonderful questions. And they really allow me to think deeply. And I know that you're also a deep thinker, and I can feel the wisdom in your questions and in your worldview.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for everyone who joined us. This will be available by replay. We'll send it out to folks who registered but maybe couldn't actually make it live. And we look forward to seeing you for the next one.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.